where are we now? How do we understand where we are? And how do we understand ourselves as creatures in relation to God? And so again, the philosophical trajectory here was nature stimulates us to start thinking. Once we start thinking, we can then make our thinking or our knowing an object of our own study.
Hello, everyone. This is Father Michael Tishel, and I am joined by a special guest and friend, Dr. Christopher McLaughlin, who I've known for many years from Boston, Massachusetts. So thank you very much, Christopher, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad we get to have a little chat.
Me
Fine.
too. After the kids are in bed, and actually the secret is my kids aren't quite in bed yet, but my wife very graciously allowed me to do this. And she's suffering upstairs
I
as
know.
as we as as we speak. But I hope
Hmm.
not too much. But um,
Yeah,
anyway,
good.
thank you very much for being up for talking. And we've known each other for a number of years. We have a good amount of mutual friends. But as you mentioned when I saw you up in Boston recently, I think a nice sit down chat is long overdue. And
Hmm. Hmm.
unfortunately, as life has it, that means sometimes these invitations end up being at least the beginning of that sit down
Hmm.
chat. But that also kind of makes it kind of cool for our audience because they'll be able to hear what will hopefully be a an exciting chat for the both of us as well about some interesting topics and just a little bit about your own background as well, because you have a very interesting background, both as far as your studies are concerned and your life journey and your faith journey. And if you don't mind, just kind of dive right in. So
Yeah, great.
the first question I want to ask is a nice and broad question, which is just simply, who are you, Dr. Christopher? Who are you?
Yeah, yeah,
Answer
yeah.
that as
Well, that's tough, isn't it? That's the question. Who am I? I think right. It's hard to know if we're doing this kind of historically, how far back to go. I study. I've studied patristic theology. I guess that's the probably most relevant piece. Possibly is that I'm actually at your father's parish up here in Boston at Holy Resurrection, and I studied in the Boston area. I went to Boston College. I teach theology now at the college level at Boston College and also at Hellenic College, your alma mater. At least, of course, you went
working
to
wise? Yeah.
the seminar. Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, right. Working wise. So anyway, that's in the most basic couple of details. That's what
And
I
where are
do.
you from
Where
originally?
Yeah, I was born in Ohio, born and raised in Ohio, lived there for a while, moved down to the south, not not too far from Georgia. I was in South Carolina for most of my life, even through college. I was in South Carolina. Spent a little more time up in the Ohio area, and then moved to Boston about 10 years ago to start studying, and it stuck. We stuck, so here we are. Yeah.
Wonderful. So you went from the Midwest down south back to the Northeast, and the Northeast so far has stuck. Yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
the warmer climate of the South didn't
Oh man. I mean, on cold days like this, it's so attractive. And but besides that, the warmth of the people is really attractive.
Hmm.
I loved my time in the South. But Boston just has, for a lot of reasons, been where we think we need to be, and we're
Hmm.
happy here too.
Yes, and you have a family, a beautiful family, and
Yeah.
children,
Hmm.
and so that's a certainly an important aspect of who you are, I'm sure.
Hmm.
As far as
Yeah.
your life is concerned. And what about a little bit about your family of origin, and maybe a little history in that regards?
Yeah. What can I say? So I'm an only child. Uh, I have step siblings, but I come from a much larger family outside of my nuclear family. My mom is one of 11, and so
Wow.
I have lots of cousins. Actually, I was spending time around Christmas time. I was with my the rest of my family up in Ohio. My grandmother is still alive, and she told me that my son is her 30th great grandchild,
Wow,
um,
that's
and
incredible.
and counting. Yeah, so I've got all kinds of cousins. They're all having kids. We have a very big family. Um, my family is mostly on the religious side, raised Catholic. Some are still Catholic, some are Protestant, various stripes. But that was, yeah, the faith of my mother, and that Catholic faith was part of my own upbringing.
Okay.
Hmm. I
What
became, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I'm the only one in my family that became Orthodox. I don't really know how much my family knows about Orthodoxy. They hear about it through me, I guess, but I don't know how much they've experienced it. Um, yeah, it's actually been what it was Theophany 2012 when I was received into the Orthodox Church. So Theophany is a special time
Hmm.
for me, and that was back in Ohio. But it started in college. It started when I was in South Carolina. I studied theology down there, religious studies they called it, but I was at a state school. But as I studied, I happened to have a professor at a state university in the Bible Belt of all places who introduced all the students to the Orthodox Church. He was
Wow.
Orthodox, and he introduced us to the Eastern side of things, which was
Sure.
it wasn't so strange for me. It was like a homecoming for me, but I think it's pretty strange for my Bible believing uh, colleagues down there.
I can imagine. Were there
Yeah.
any other uh, classmates of yours that ended up embracing Orthodoxy through that experience, or?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's hard to know what the kind of ripple effect is, but I would say, as far as direct encounters with the Orthodox Church down there at the school, at least through this one professor, I wouldn't be surprised if he had one or two people out of all the people that he was teaching every year. I wouldn't be surprised if one or two or more, became Orthodox.
Hmm.
I certainly had, let's see, one, two, three, I don't know, a handful of close friends became Orthodox because they were in that same orbit. And so that's only talking about a couple of years worth in my
Hmm.
own limited uh sphere there.
Sure.
But yeah, that it stuck. It stuck with people. Yeah, I wasn't the
Yeah.
only one.
And when you say he introduced you to Orthodoxy, I mean, like what, and other people as well, what does that mean exactly? And obviously it was in a way that ended up, facilitating your actual entry into the church. So what can you describe a little bit about what that introduction, as far as his presentation of it and his kind of um, opening up to you in a certain way, that how that kind of attracted you, or drew you in?
Yes, I mean the first thing was that I took an introduction to Christian theology course, which is like a 300 level, 3000 level, however you number it, but
Hmm.
kind of kind of advanced-ish undergraduate class. And it was just an introduction, but apart from reading a pretty decent amount of C.S. Lewis, a lot of the sources were Eastern sources. So we read Catholic sources too. We read some Augustine, we read some Bonaventure. I think we read Bonaventure's Life of Saint Francis, or something from Aquinas. So there was, the big names in the
Sure.
Western tradition we read. But we focused on people like Athanasius. Who else do we read? We read Saint Athanasius. We read a little bit of Origen. It's hard for me to remember now. We read The Way of a Pilgrim, and so that was, I should tell you, I ended up taking a lot of classes with this poor professor. Um, and so that, like, on the most basic level, he just showed us a few of the Greek fathers and how they talk through things, or something of the spiritual life of the East, the practice of the Jesus prayer, the idea that you could have a kind of prayer of the heart, a ceaseless prayer that was actually methodical. Like, people could follow this.
Hmm.
And it was for everybody. It's
Hmm.
not, you don't have to go out uh, into the desert and live an austere Benedictine life to discover your interiority in a way that's regimented and regular. Um, that you could track spiritual progress in some ways,
Hmm.
not to get too hung up on that, but that you could actually feel that you were kind of becoming more, um, transformed somehow, changed somehow. So anyway, the fact that he showed us that just in snippets in that intro class, but much more directly, by the time I was leaving, he was developing a class called Mysteries of the Christian East. So that's about as direct,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
which included a trip to St. Anthony's Monastery in
Really
Arizona.
interesting.
Yeah. So that was pretty wild. I was in the kind of inaugural class, and there were
Hmm.
like, I don't know, 30 of us or something who took this as a Maymester
Maymester.
class.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So, kind of low stakes in a way, as far as students
Hmm.
go, it's kind of low stakes. Um, yeah, that was wild because we had people, all kinds of people signed up, and then here they are at Athonite, effectively an Athonite
Hmm.
monastery, you
So,
know?
and how did that work as far as the class dynamic? And then when you actually visited the monastery, was that towards the end of the class or was that midway through or?
Yeah, how long was the class? I'm trying to remember now because I think as a Maymester, I think it was really condensed. Not even
Hmm.
6 weeks. I think it was like 4 weeks.
I
Um,
see.
and so it was like a week of preparation where, or maybe like a week and a half of preparation, something like that, where we read a lot,
Mm.
and the syllabus was very nice. It's hard for me to recall it exactly now, but it was, like, here's a very basic introduction to Orthodoxy. Here's an introduction to the liturgy. Here's what the liturgy looks like. Here's how it's practiced. Here's what it sounds like. We listened to it a little bit. Um, and introduction to the Jesus prayer and that kind of thing. I think we read a piece by um, Archbishop Gallitzin,
Hmm.
Why Monks. And so to get into, the spirit of, especially my
It was called
colleagues,
Why Monks?
Why Monks, I think was the
Uh-huh.
name of it.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
haven't seen that one from him.
Yeah. I mean, it's been 15 years now
Yeah.
since I've read that, but, um, right. And so coming from a Catholic background, and I was also interested in the monastic life, all
Mm.
that was smooth sailing,
Right.
right? Because it's basically just old form monasticism, right? So it's
Hmm.
great. Um, but I had Protestant colleagues who, had no idea what they were getting into. I think people had kind of mixed reactions. So anyway, we spent some time prepping. Then I think we read The Orthodox Way, and maybe we read The Mountain of Silence,
Nice. Yeah.
the Aquas Marquides. I
Yeah.
think while we were out there at the monastery, um, and so much of it you have to stay in the narthex. All of us
Hmm.
were in the
Not
narthex, but
Orthodox, right?
yeah, but there we are at at midnight or 1 a.m. because they start so early at St. Anthony's. Um, and we're all there. The women are wearing headscarves. Some of them, they've never worn a headscarf in their life. The men all have to wear long sleeves and everything. But everyone, but anyway, it was just incredible. So
Yeah.
that was, we're flung into the deep end, really. Like that's
How long
as
how long did you actually stay at the monastery?
I think it must have been 5 days, something like that.
Hmm.
So there
That's
was
a
at
pretty.
least one liturgy, I think. I
Mhm.
don't remember. And we would have regular meeting times during the day, like we'd meet twice.
Okay.
And so part of it was we were doing the readings and we were talking them through, like the
Oh wow.
Marquides thing. And then
Oh, so
the
you would continue the class at the monastery.
at the monastery, yeah.
Wow,
Yeah, and kind of
interesting.
reflect on what's going on.
And you
Um,
stayed, and when you stayed there, you didn't stay like at a hotel nearby. You stayed at the
no,
monastery
yeah,
itself.
we were, yeah, they put us up. They put us up
Wow,
there. Yeah, men with
interesting.
men, of course. Yeah, men
Sure,
had their own. Right. Yeah. So really, really remarkable. Remarkable that I don't even know if I should talk about the monastery giving the blessing to do that. I didn't even think about that as a, but it's remarkable that they would have allowed that now that I'm,
sure.
thinking back
No,
on it.
I mean, I think I can see how a group, would be allowed to do that if it was a beneficial, kind of
Yeah.
visit or something like that. But
Yeah. And all very respectful. And like he had us,
sure, sure,
the
sure.
expectations were clear and all that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, I'm just, I mean, I just, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because it's like yeah, it's a pilgrimage, but for people who don't really know what a pilgrimage is, who are like
yeah.
not
Yeah.
not sure what they're getting themselves into, and then but then there's also like you're able to actually reflect on it in the space itself, in the atmosphere of the monastery
Yeah.
itself, and that actually reminds me a little bit of what you brought up in our conversation when we were up in Boston, where you were talking about framing intro to orthodoxy, the class that you're teaching or that you have been teaching,
Yeah.
kind of trying to remove as many barriers. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but you kind of rather than trying to explain certain things about the ascetic life or something like that, basically just introducing them as quickly as possible to primary sources to get them to feel a sense of grace, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't remember exactly
That's,
what you put it how you put it, but the connection with what you said at that time and the fact that you had this class in a monastery is just kind
yeah.
of a fascinating. I don't know if there's anything that
Yeah.
sparks for you at all, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe we can talk about this a little bit because you're a pedagogue and you're a priest. And so you're leading people into the church all the time and those who are
hmm.
in the church, you're trying to help them go deeper. Um,
And
you know,
teaching, yeah,
I
yeah, and teaching has its own beauty to it, right? And
hmm
even I know in the Cypriot tradition, rather priests are often referred to as daskalos, or like teacher,
ah hmm
and which I think comes from actually, the original, Hebrew understanding of the rabbi being the teacher, and
hmm
because Cyprus has some more explicit, Jewish influences, I think, than other parts of Greece, from what I've come to
oh,
learn
okay.
through my senior priest here, Father Panagiotis, who's from Cyprus. But so yeah, that kind of maybe surprising interweaving of yeah, pedagogy and grace,
hmm
um, is interesting to maybe to examine, especially within a Western context where, at least in a very caricatured sense, sometimes people will offer, a critique of Western Christianity as like having separated theology and spirituality, where you have the mystics on, over here, and you have the theologians over here, and and then often people will point to the East as kind of seeing them in more tandem, or two sides of the same coin or something. But from the sense of teaching, and yeah, we could talk about this later or now, but teaching within a certain environment of prayer, uh, as far as that experience is concerned, and then what we had chatted about in Boston, as far as
hmm
your desire to bring grace into the classroom, you know, so that people could taste it directly and not just hear about it. I'm curious to hear if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what can I say? So I teach, don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but
I can't remember if it
uh
was the Intro to Orthodoxy class or one of your classes at I think it was
that's
at BC actually. I think
that's
it
what
was
I'm
was
wondering.
it the I think it
Yeah.
was the maybe the freshman seminar if I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
thanks. I think
Yeah.
that's right. And the
Yep.
reason why I was pausing was because when I teach at Hellenic,
It's
I feel
obvious. Yeah,
like
you're always
I'm
you're
being brought into
introducing.
grace. Yeah.
Sure, sure,
Yeah,
sure. No, I
exactly.
understand. Yeah,
Exactly.
that
Like
was
it's
the one at the
there.
BC. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So at BC, and this is not to, put down the spiritual environment there, but
Sure.
the because the theology core is a requirement for this university that has a whole range, right, of demographic that it's beholden to, that you can't take anything for granted as far as how you're teaching a basic theology course.
Hmm.
And so my purpose, my goal is to try to get them to to see. Well, the way that C.S. Lewis puts it, his little essay called Meditation in a Tool Shed. Do you know that essay?
No, not
Oh,
familiar.
oh, it's lovely. It's 3 pages
Okay.
long. It's very
Oh,
short.
nice.
The basic premise is that there are two ways of approaching anything in life. One is looking at and kind of studying it from this remove in a neutral way. And the other is looking along the experience and letting the experience kind of reveal the nature of the thing
You
to
said
you.
looking along the experience?
Yeah, looking along versus looking at the experience, right?
Oh,
Um, so let me give you
yeah,
the little
say more of that.
analogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the setup to the whole thing is he says I was in a tool shed, in a dark tool shed today, and in the irregular cranny of the at the top of the shed, there was a little shaft of light coming in. And that beam of light was the most striking thing in that dark tool shed. I could see little motes of dust floating in it, right? And I could see the shaft, but I wasn't seeing anything by the shaft. I was looking at the shaft.
Hmm.
Then I positioned myself so that the light from that
Oh, interesting.
cranny was falling on my eyes. And now I didn't see the light anymore. Instead, what I saw was the leaves of the tree blowing outside and 90
Hmm.
odd million miles away, the sun. And so looking at versus looking along are two quite different experiences.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. Yeah, perspective.
Hmm.
The change in perspective. And so looking along would be analogous to the more kind of abstracted, or is it the
No,
opposite?
the more so yeah, so it's more like so his critique and the purpose of the piece is he says that people have for a long time, he says for the last 50 years, but this is in the middle of the 20th century. So
Hmm.
now we have to say in the past century because I don't think things have changed in
Hmm.
the other direction. He says that for all that this time, the people who have looked at the world scientifically have had it all their own way. The people who say the person who knows something best is the person who's not bound to the thing in any confessional way.
Hmm.
In other words, who,
Expertise.
expertise, who's better at
Hmm.
understanding the phenomenon we call being in love? Is it the poets? Is it the lovers, or is it the psychologist on the outside, or the
Yeah,
even,
yeah, yeah.
who's looking at it and who's trying to give an account of the thing, but not from the inside, from a neutral, standing outside, value-free position, right?
So that the sort of interpretation or the explanation resonates very deeply, and I'd love to follow that more. But call it my post putting the kids to bed, brain.
I know
The
it.
you got to help me with the image itself because yeah, so you have the yeah the shaft of light coming in through the into the tool shed, right? So it's dark
Hmm.
otherwise. There's a shaft of light coming in. if you look along it, you're basically looking at the shaft itself and how it's sort of illuminating certain things. Is that what you're?
Oh, I see, I see. So, uh, right. So looking at it is him standing outside of the shaft of light and examining it as a shaft of light, let's say. You see,
Gotcha.
so it's an object for him.
Gotcha.
But if he steps into it, it's no
Right.
longer an object for him, but it, as you say, but it's lighting up other things. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay. That makes perfect sense. Yes, that makes perfect sense. That's a very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I feel like that's going to take some time for me to not just process it, but like let it sink in because that's a beautiful. I mean, I've thought a lot about you know uh, theoretical knowledge versus experiential or participatory
Yeah,
or
yeah.
but something about that very like concrete example and then the um the dynamic of change in perspective. um yeah, it's a very generative kind of uh example. I'm definitely looking forward to reading that short reflection too.
Yeah, great. And he puts it so nicely, and so it's really, yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
But the rub then, or the upshot of that is that when I try to teach my intro theology courses, I and especially not when I take faith for granted, but when I have to kind of do some apologetic work, I really try to make it an introduction in the sense that I'm really trying to lead them inside
Mm.
to some extent, is so
Hmm.
that they look along what it's like to be a Christian. Like, this is what the world looks like when you're a Christian. This is what Christ looks like when you're a Christian. You see, and
Yeah,
so
wait, so wait,
Christian,
you got to back up because you broke down the word introduction, and we
uh,
can't assume that everybody understands the etymology there, which is really cool. So can you explain what you
yeah,
did there?
yeah, yeah. I can try to. I mean, I get mixed up with intra and intro. Let's see if
Sure.
this works. But uh,
Right.
ductio from the verb ducere, which means to lead. Aqueduct, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Right? We get those
But
words.
it's isn't it the same as education? Like
Oh,
edu, ed,
exactly.
right? Like edu, yeah,
Yeah, yep. Ducere again.
educare, yeah, right. Hmm.
Educatio, right? Yeah,
Right.
which is to lead out.
Out, right. Yep.
Yeah, to draw out something like that.
Draw out, right.
Uh-huh.
Which
Yeah,
still I think assumes a level of interiority, right? Because
exactly.
I mean, you could be drawing, I don't know, you could be revealing or drawing something out of the external world, but I mean, my understanding is there's more of a sense of drawing out what's innate in the human
Totally.
being, rather than
Yes,
filling the empty bucket or something like that. But anyway,
exactly.
not to get
Perfect.
too bogged down in the etymology, but the idea of introducing being a kind of a leading into something
Yep.
versus a studying about.
Yeah, like something superficial. It's like
Hmm.
there are this many people that are Christian, and
Hmm.
it's this old, and here's what the here's the geography of it,
Hmm.
that kind of
Hmm.
thing, right? Or here's what the church is shaped like, that kind of thing. All that. I'm not saying that's not relevant, and the dates and the development and the all that, but when you mention kind of bringing grace in, what I yeah, this is kind of what I mean is that I want them in the most basic sense. I want them to have an experience of intellectual pleasure. Okay, so I'm just thinking I've got kind of steps that I'm trying to take, and one of them is to get them to discover their own interiority, discover that they have a soul, discover that they have a mind, discover um, that you can order those
How do you do that?
things. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, great. I don't know as well as I can. It's something like this. Okay, I don't
We're
know.
never going
This
to
is
get to the point of the conversation where I'm
I
gonna
know.
keep interrupting
I
you.
know. I know. Yeah, and I hope you don't mind
I
going
love
into
it. I
it.
mean, I appreciate it. You're gonna be driven crazy by the end of the
I'm so
conversation,
happy.
but
No, I'm so happy. Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to good. Yeah, so let me just maybe the best way, the easiest way is to tell you what I'm doing right now in my in my class.
True.
We're 2 weeks in. We've had 3 sessions. The class is it's an introduction. It's called God, Self, and Society. So
Mm,
it's meant to be this kind of catch-all Christian theology course. Self-discovery, who are you? What in the world is God? Is there a God? How do you know? What's he like if there's a God? That kind of thing. And then how do you love your neighbor? How do you pursue justice in the world? That kind of thing. The way that I teach it, at least the way I'm teaching it right now, is I've got 2 modules. That's it. And the first one is uh, the desire to know. The idea is that the most basic thing about being a human is that we are the kinds of things that want to know everything about everything. And I say that from, of course, having studied, you know how it is. You study and you get to kind of know your habits of mind and all of that. So that's a great way to discover what it means to be a knower and somebody that desires to know. But the better way, I think, is to have kids and to
mhm,
see the thing happening. I mean,
mhm,
it's just
mhm,
incredible. Like
mhm,
my son's 16 months, you saw him running all over the place.
mhm,
Um, he is curious about every single thing. He wants to,
mhm,
like, he just soaks it up. He loves it. He wants to know everything. My daughter, she asks questions all the time. She wants to, and they're not satisfied if you give them a question that skirts the issue.
mhm,
They want to
mhm.
know the truth, like, is that
Sure.
real?
Oh
Is
yeah.
that, you know? And so we're the kinds of things that desire to know. And so I just tell them that up front, and I try to give them examples. I try to make it relevant for them. Um, and it's very basic. The example, I hope I'm not getting bogged down now, but
No, no.
the example that I gave today was, I'm talking to college kids. It's like your friend texts you and says, I'm going to be at so and so's house, so I look forward to seeing you there. And you say, great, okay. And I wanted to know because on the one hand, you think like you're in perplexity because on the one hand, you know your friend to be honest and you thought they wanted to hang out with you and so
Christopher,
you,
start that
you had
thought
that
over because it broke up for just a moment.
expectation
It yeah.
and now all of a sudden
It broke up for about I would say 15 seconds where the signal was not great. So can you start that one example over if you don't mind?
yeah
It's a little spotty still. Let's see if we
I'll
can.
let it
Yeah,
recover. Are
let
we
it
more
recover.
stable
Yeah,
now?
the voice is stable. The visual. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think we're back. It was like a really good point, and that's usually when technology that likes to go on the fritz. So I think we're
Great.
okay. I think we're okay.
I know. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes.
rewind just a little bit.
So I
Yeah.
try to teach the great. Yeah, so I try to make my students' own experience show them what it means to be someone who desires to know. That they also have this desire kind of on a daily basis in the most basic ways. So I told them today, uh, how far into this do I want to go? That philosophy or the desire to know, the quest for knowledge, begins when we're perplexed, when we're confused about something, and when
Hmm.
we want to know about it. So, because you have to kind of have attention. It has to matter to you in order
Hmm.
to
Sure.
really pursue it. And so you get into a state of aporia, no way out in this,
Hmm.
like you're stuck. And the example that I gave them was that, imagine if your friend texted you early in the day and said, "Hey, I'm going to be at that event tonight. Um, so you'll have a friend there, and so you're excited about that because you go and you're actually going to know somebody and you're happy about that. But then you show up and no, your friend isn't there, nowhere to be found. And on the one hand, your immediate experience, it's obvious the person's not here. Okay, so that's
Hmm.
like incontrovertible point number one.
Hmm.
But apparently, incontrovertible point number two is you thought that that person was really affirming. They were be so flaky. You and you thought that they really wanted to hang a knot there. Did we do it again? It happened again, didn't it?
It happened. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's like right at the one of the punchlines here.
Yeah, right at the
Incontrovertible point
punchline.
number two, and then I lost you, but it looks good now.
Yeah. Let me forget about that. Maybe I'll try a different way because
Sure.
there's a way, which is
Okay. Yep. I don't know what's going on. Is your signal pretty
I think
strong?
it's on my side. Yeah, I think it's on
Really?
my side.
Okay. That's all
Okay,
right.
I think I'm better. I think I'm
You're
better now.
stronger. Okay. No
Yeah.
problem. No problem. We can always
Yeah.
edit stuff out, so it's fine. Yeah.
So we have that first module, desire to know, and what the way that I show my students this kind of experience is I tell them about Socrates. This is the example. A different example that I gave today was Socrates in the Apology. It has two seemingly incontrovertible but mutually exclusive truths that he has to try
Mm,
to hold on to.
mm.
A friend of his, goes to the oracle at Delphi and asks the oracle, "Who's the wisest?" And the response, "Who is the wisest of them all? None is wiser than Socrates." And there's no, it's like mirror, mirror on the wall. You never, in Snow White, you never question that the mirror is obviously, that the mirror is obviously in fact.
There you are.
Okay. Yeah, so nobody questions that the mirror is infallible. And likewise, nobody questions that the oracle that Apollo's oracle is infallible, right? He says that
Hmm.
that none is wiser than Socrates. So Socrates can't question that. He's got to take it at face value. That's
Interesting.
true. Okay,
Hmm.
but on the other
Hmm.
hand, he also says, I have irrefutable experiential knowledge that I don't know anything, that I don't know.
Mm.
So the plain fact is I don't know. That irrefutable, infallible message is none is wiser than I. Okay, so he's in a state of perplexity, and that is what that's what sets off the philosophy, the philosophical journey. And you really now you want to know. Um, and
Tension.
so that's where the desire. Maybe I'll give just one other little example because that's kind of abstract, maybe in a way. But I gave the example for the students of somebody texting you, they say, let's go out to, to this event tonight. Okay, great. I'll see you there. You show up to the event and your friend isn't there. And now you've got the incontrovertible fact that you're there by yourself, right? And on the other hand, that your friend said they were going to be there. So now, and now your friend isn't there. So why not? Right? And that's very basic. And maybe it's even a little bit silly, but your first question is why? Why isn't my friend here? Right. And so all of a sudden, whether you like it or not, you're trying to get to the bottom of something. You're actually trying to be a philosopher, and you're not going to be satisfied until you think you have the actual answer, not a pretend answer,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But a real answer. And that's the
Mm.
only time your mind is going to come to rest.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Yeah, that trying to tap into or show them that there's this inherent tension that we experience on a daily basis, maybe an impasse, as you kind of alluded to, the sense in which we have a problem to solve, and so this is kind of the the way of showing young people, let's say, that we're all philosophers, that we're all on this quest to know. This is kind of one of your missions, I guess you could say, or one of your goals in the class.
Yeah, yeah. And let me just add on to that, and then if you don't mind, then I'll get to the second module, which is the actual
Please,
theological content, right? But
please,
this is the
the first
propedeutic
step.
part,
Hmm.
preparatio, right? Um, the but the way that we come to discover, to have self-knowledge, like what kind of thing am I? Oh, I'm a thing that desires to know. That actually, you can't just sit in your room and close your eyes and introspect and know yourself in that way,
Hmm.
because you don't see yourself as a knowing thing until you're exercising the activity of thinking and trying to come to an answer. So you actually, and this is all Aristotle and it's all Plato, but basically you have to be stimulated from something outside first. Something outside you stimulates the quest to know. Then, so you desire to know nature, you desire to know things outside of yourself. Once you engage in that quest of starting to try to know things, it's possible for you then to reflect on yourself in the act of knowing or in the
Hmm.
act of
Hmm.
thinking.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
if you do that, then your quest for understanding nature has become self-knowledge, because now you know yourself as a thing that desires to know.
Hmm. But there is this dialectic between the subject and the object, right? Something outside of yourself is the kind of initiating the stimulus, and then that, yeah, as you said, it kind of ignites something inside of you. There's a response. There's a lot there because I've been thinking about this recently. There's a Orthodox poet by the name of Scott Cairns. I don't know if you've ever come across any of his
Yeah, yeah,
poetry.
I've heard of him. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, he's got some really nice work, and I just recently got my hands on a very small volume called "Correspondence with My Greeks," and it's sort of he introduces it by saying that basically he tells his students, he always starts his morning of writing by reading, and that all of his writing is ultimately sort of a response to a conversation that he's having with these primarily dead you know figures, in his case, like a lot of the modern Greek um, poets, but then also who then kind of are having conversations with ancient Greek mythology or ancient philosophers or whatever.
Hmm.
But this notion of his poetry as responsive, right, it really stimulated a lot of thought in my own mind, particularly in this sense that, like, you kind of get this sense that maybe in our modern context, we have this innate feeling that we sort of initiated things ourselves, that we're sort of the initiators of our reality somehow. I mean, no one would necessarily
Hmm.
say it that way, but there's this kind of sense of like, you know, we're sort of our own gods. As this, man has kind of replaced God, and
Yeah.
so like we're the initiator, and then other people respond to us. And there is something kind of rather recognizing that, humbling and also freeing about recognizing that the stimulus is from outside of ourselves, and we don't really even get that tension or that desire until something from outside of us has drawn us out or something. I don't know if that
Yeah,
resonates at all,
yeah,
but
right. And somehow um reality at certain points just doesn't do what we expect it to do. So I mean it's a bit of a strange thing, because on the one hand, nature or reality or
okay, so
whatever kind of
okay, uh-huh. No, go
well,
ahead. Yeah.
it's got to be predictable in a way, right? It has to have a pattern there for us to be able to actually extract meaning and actually, understand things. On the other hand, it it does weird things, especially through our senses, that cause us to have to pause and then become reflective. I look at a pencil, I see its shape, and then my son takes it and puts it in my cup of water, and now all of a sudden I'm looking at it and it looks like it's bent, right? So it's this aporia. If you care about it, right, then it sends you on
Mhm.
a journey. And now all of a sudden you're a scientist wanting to understand optics and how light moves through different media. And so all of a sudden you're trying to ask the why question. And so sensation has has not been predictable for you until of course you understand the reason. And then of course it's predictable again, right? It falls back into line and you make sense of it. But it stimulates you to have questions, to want to know.
That's fascinating. And that yeah, that that in and of itself stimulates a lot of thoughts. There's a Cypriot writer. He's he kind of has a theological background, but he's done a lot of poetry and music. And his name's Panayotis Thoma, and he and I both studied under the same professor in Thessaloniki. But he wrote a fascinating book putting Wendell Berry in dialogue with a modern Greek poet named Nikos Gavril Benzikis from Thessaloniki, and sort of compares their reflections, particularly on the topic of place and kind of familiar place and how they wrote from these familiar places. In Nikos Benzikis' case, the city of Thessaloniki, and Wendell Berry's case, his family farm in Kentucky, and kind of from a very agrarian perspective. But one thing that struck me about something that Panagiotis uh, said, which was almost like a crisis for me in a sense. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this based on your reflection. Is essentially that um, it's talking about this kind of subject object dynamic and how uh, true poetry or true reflection on true authorship based on place has to take the object for what it is,
Hmm.
and not try to like impose anything on it. Like when you impose something on it, that's kind of like uh, what he would consider to be romanticism in a certain sense, or that there's like a yeah, kind of you're automatically turning it into some metaphorical meaning or something like that. But you have to take the object as the object, try to humble yourself in a certain sense before the object as much as possible, and let it, I guess, maybe let it puzzle you like that. I don't know exactly. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of what Flannery O'Connor does with fiction, where she says a good fiction writer has to also learn how to draw, because when you draw, you see reality and you're not kind of imposing anything on
Uh,
it. And then
uh-huh.
the mystery is supposed to emerge from your realistic description of reality versus you trying to kind of superimpose some sort of Christian message or something like that
Yeah,
on it.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I guess I'm curious to hear, based on what you're saying, as far as like um, as far as yeah, the aporia, or the impasse or the puzzlement that comes
Hmm.
from um, seeing something differently, or in a confusing way, or this kind of these two seemingly contradictory things. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know if you have anything to say
yeah,
about that.
yeah. That's interesting. The I'm no poet, but I love the poets, and I do think that they're. I mean, I have some that
You're the
that
greatest poet. Then if you say you're no poet, then that means that you must be
therefore,
the greatest poet. Yeah,
yeah,
therefore.
yeah. Well, what I love about the poets is their sensitivity and their willingness to let the world speak, and then And then to go through the difficult imaginative process of finding the exact right words to say, to characterize this thing precisely, which is the way, yeah, when you read someone like Shakespeare, he always gets at the essence of a thing. He
Hmm.
always
Hmm.
puts the exact phrase to put you right there. I mean, um, I can't even give good examples because, but it's just so basic.
Well,
Like he
yeah, but
really
and I
hits
guess
it.
I'm curious about that because um, it's so easy for me to see a thing and to automatically impose my ideas about that thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it could get to the point where I'm, theologizing about, a USB to USB-C converter or something
yeah,
like that. Like, I don't know if I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. But what you're saying, with poetry is that there's almost this like crucifixion of the romanticism, the idealism. It wasn't romanticism, it was idealism. I think it was
yeah,
was
yeah.
really
Okay,
yeah,
that's
it was
helpful. That's helpful
idealism.
to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's like an idealism so that the thing itself is almost empty and devoid of, I mean, maybe is that nominalism too? I don't know, but and we're kind of imposing this sort of
yeah,
this meaning on it, which on one hand can sound really exciting and beautiful or something like that. On the other hand, you know, it's sort of like there's almost like a nihilism in there too, because it's like, well, the thing itself has no
yeah.
value.
Exactly.
And that's, I mean, Wendell Berry would argue, I think, that that leads us to sort of a devaluation of place and the earth, and that
Yeah,
we can't uphold the thing in and of itself, that we all, we have to, we're letting our own ideals or ideologies drive a ultimately a consumer a consumption overconsumption of of place, and
yeah, yeah.
uh,
That's helpful. And then it has to end in a kind of solipsism in the end because you don't have anything left to metabolize. Like there's nothing, right? Because then all of a sudden, if the world's not speaking itself to you, it's just speaking back to you what you are telling it to say. It's just an echo. You run out of significance, you run out of words, you run out of insights. Um, and then I think you
that's
get
interesting.
trapped.
So the need to have that external object and to kind of preserve the or not preserve, but to allow the object to be an object, and to kind of, even if it befuddles you, or I don't know, to kind of allow that to be what it is, paradoxically almost
Yeah.
gives you the chance to respond to it and to talk about it even more than if you were to just sort of impose your own thinking about it or something.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I would also add to that, and maybe this is the old allegory versus historia kind of
Hmm.
debate
Hmm.
in a way,
Right.
but um, of course, we don't want to read into things our own, impose our own kind of ideas on things. On the other hand, we need some kind of framework, something else that's kind of like nourishing us and informing us to help us see the right things or to help us ask the right questions, probe things in the proper way. I
Well,
remember,
you said this desire to know, right?
yeah, the
That there's
desire
we
to
all
know.
have this innate desire to know, even little children,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Which you were saying had to do with impasses, right? But maybe there's something even sort of prior to that, as far as the desire
Well,
to know,
I would, yeah, I don't know about prior or later,
or
but
yeah, I don't know.
the thing that when I talk to the students about desire to know, of course I'm using Plato, I'm using Aristotle, But one of the things that the two of them say, and again, I haven't gotten to the theology side of things, which is different. I mean, the heart is different than the head, but even still, um, they also say that there are ways to know things that are more noble, basically. Like there are, sure, you
Mm.
can ask lots of questions about anything, but some questions are going to get you closer to the heart of things, or they're going to raise you in a way that other lines of questioning aren't. Right? So, I mean, when you get into a class and you ask them what they thought of a book, and they have all these questions, but you see that the questions just circle around things that are actually not getting at into the depth, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
I mean, to take the most, I don't know, silly things is probably pretty silly, but like, why this font? Or like, why did the person use this word or this punctuation or something like that? Sometimes that can yield greater insights, but sometimes it's just smaller than the dignity of the piece really requires. And so having asking questions, I gave another example today in class actually. Like you could spend your whole life asking questions about why bees do their little bee dance, or why how can they find their way home? And that's an interesting question in and of itself, of course. And it can become in kind of a stimulation for you to understand what understanding is, because you can get reflective about it. But somehow it falls beneath the dignity of the kinds of questions you can ask about reality. You can go deeper, but so I don't think on your own steam, even if you're letting the world speak to you, I think it's going to speak to you according to the mode of the receiver, even when you're
Okay.
not
Yep.
imposing, even when you're
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
imposing,
That's
right?
interesting.
You're limiting.
So we have, yeah, so the receiver has a certain capacity that's kind of, um, in a sense, deriving the nature of the questions and then also the answers that are being gathered,
I think
right?
so. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that it's the role of the pedagogue or the teacher to kind of maybe try to bring them from one level of questioning or
Yep.
discourse or puzzlement to another. Um,
Yep. Yep.
and Yeah, I mean, I've run into that challenge just yeah in my own kind of teaching or working with young people as well, as far as like yeah, a certain level of either questioning or even just if I ask them a question, there's like an automatic kind of Wikipedia response. It's kind of
Yep.
like
Yep.
so then my kind of unwritten objective was to by the end of the class or by the end of the summer program or whatever that the same sort of questions could be asked of them, and the response would be something like you know I have to think about that one, like so
Yep.
there's but I guess um I'm I'm puzzled by that dynamic that somebody couldn't like break through that you can be kind of like going round and round and round in a certain like layer or
Yeah.
a certain level, and that
Yep.
you know somehow the data or the facts or the what you're puzzling about, because yeah I've encountered maybe situations where people seem to be curious about something that just it just kind of goes round and round. But I mean, again, maybe that's to a certain extent me imposing my philosophical brain on them. Like
No, I mean,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
think so, because I think that it's part of the spiritual life is that and I think we're all, if it's true that in Orthodox setting, that we're all meant to be going through purification, illumination, union, right? I mean, if our ultimate goal is union,
Right.
and that's for everybody, there's not people don't get left out of that, then part of the path to union is to come to a greater understanding of nature and how it relates to God. And that's place in the like in the broadest sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Where are we now? How do we understand where we are, and how do we understand ourselves as creatures in relation to God? And so we can, again, the philosophical trajectory here was nature stimulates us to start thinking. Once we start thinking, we can then make our thinking or our knowing an object of our own study.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and this is where I think the poets, some of the poets are really special. I'm thinking of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, for example,
Hmm. Hmm.
where they're not only very careful in their attempt to understand nature, they're also very careful in trying to understand the powers of the human person that enables me to try to understand nature and to find its intelligibility and then to try to express it. What is that? And that raises us from an understanding of kind of material forces and laws and patterns of behavior to understanding ourselves as intellects, as knowers.
Hmm.
And that is to start understanding the image of God. So that's a deeper thing. That's more inside
That's
information, let's
fascinating.
say.
Yeah, yeah, the interiority or the yeah more. Um, yeah, I'm gonna have to process that whole kind of um journey from desiring to know nature, I guess, and then um studying nature, then thinking about how you can study nature, or how you can, yeah, how you can know.
Yeah, yeah.
And that kind of to bring us back to the towards the beginning of the conversation, are you knowing by studying about the ray of light, or are you entering into it? And I wanted to
Mhm.
ask you something about that because I have heard a concern by a young person that um, if I enter in, I'm sort of bound by it,
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's the
rather than
problem.
if I'm kind of at a distance, I'm able to compare and contrast, this ray of light versus that ray of light, you know,
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it had the hand
Yeah.
raising thing, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, yeah, I guess what Lewis would say, just since we're using his own analogy, is that if you've never experienced the thing from the inside, then you're really playing with counters. You're playing with false chips,
Hmm.
let's
Hmm.
say,
Hmm.
there's nothing's at stake. Or I mean, even worse, and I don't mean it sounds like the person asked that in good faith, and so I don't
For
mean to,
sure, for sure.
to
Yeah.
put it down. But you're, you're using words without understanding their reference, really.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and
And
the
that
idea,
gets at the what in Panayiotis Thomas's book about Wendell Berry and Benzies is this notion of authorship based on place, like authorship based on the reference point being a very kind of deep experience of a place. And you could, I mean, that place could also be, as Thomas talked at, the place of the Holy Trinity. Like place doesn't have to be,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
a
yeah.
created place. It could, anyway. But
Right, right. But looking at reality and letting it be real and not imposing something on it, not shifting, right? Because our mind is such a nimble place. This is the Flannery O'Connor bit I think that you were talking about earlier. It seems to me it's like you've got, right, if I start with a vague imagination, then I can start making that idea do whatever I want. And there's no, as Owen Barfield put it, there's no uh slovenly thinking can go on interminably. You can because you'll never
boy,
know that you're wrong. You'll never know that you've run up against something.
I may be a slovenly thinker, but anyway.
Well, me too. Yeah, of course we are. Of course, right?
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lord have mercy.
Hmm. But let me
Family.
let me just
Yeah.
finish off
Please, please.
that one thought for that young person is that And again, my wife and I are listening to That Hideous Strength. C.S. Lewis is, I don't know if you know
Nice.
that, but yeah, okay.
I'm familiar with it. I have not read it
Oh,
yet.
it's one of our favorites. Anyway,
Nice.
this comes up at one point because there's a woman who gets drawn into the orbit, of a potential kind of basically a conversion possibility, and she's puzzling it through, and she's saying, but shouldn't I kind of know more about this before I make the leap? And the response is, I mean, before I join your company, and what they say is, well, it's like getting married, or it's like trying something new to eat. You just have to do it. There's no words that can get you into the experience. You just have to experience it. You have to take the
Hmm.
plunge. No one's going to be able to describe to you satisfactorily what this thing tastes like.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
just have to go through the risk, make yourself vulnerable, and that's looking along. That's looking along.
Right. And that's a beautiful word to folks. I think especially younger folks, but probably anybody is like the the beauty of taking that risk with a certain deficit of knowledge, maybe partial knowledge or um, yeah, the fear of making the wrong decision or something like that. That there's a beauty and there's a joy and there's a an adventure in that participatory knowledge, right? In that jumping into married life or jumping into I don't know, a new kind of career or
Right.
or embracing the church or however whatever that would look like that um you know there's a temptation or there's a voice that says I need to have it all figured out. I have to have all my ducks in a row. I have to have all my finances worked out. I've got to
Hmm.
every single last thing kind of
Yeah.
worked out and I got to really know this person and and then we can be by God's grace swept away in a slightly more whimsical maybe
Yeah.
adventure that is serious on one hand, but it's just so it's and it's terrifying too, but it's also so beautiful. I mean, it's
Yeah. And
yeah.
and it's not so blind. I mean, like, that beauty's real. It might be also terrible in a way. I mean, you can't control it and all of that, right? Aslan's not a tame lion, that whole thing,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
right? But that doesn't mean that it's not blind in the sense that you have no evidence, right? Because it's already drawn you, it's spoken to you, and you
Sure.
know that that's its real voice, like you can tell that. Will it cause something? Yeah, it probably will, and not things that you can foresee, but right? But you still know that you've made the right decision. You still know you've moved in the right. The thing hasn't, the thing's not going to be false to you, even if it's going to be hard. You
Hmm.
can kind of see
Hmm.
that, I think.
Hmm. And that's a beautiful and fascinating kind of sense that there's an you could say almost like an imperfection perhaps in the kind of rational, comprehensive, the sense that you could potentially know everything about something,
Hmm.
right? And so there's like this almost imperfection in that respect, but more in respect to that childlike desire to know that you were referencing, um, the the lack of blindness kind of taps into that, the
Yeah,
sight
great.
the sight taps into that that
Yeah.
that desire that's always expanding and maturing and being brought into greater you know depths and heights of knowing too.
Yeah. Yeah. That childlikeness is not foolishness. Right? I mean,
Hmm.
the kids have such good instincts. They have such an insight
Yes.
into things. Yeah. So I think that recovery, um, and in place of the kind of artificial over rationalizing, securing everything, just wanting to make sure that you've answered every question when you know that you couldn't possibly anyways. You're kind of just stalling, maybe, in a certain way. Anyway,
Yep.
that happens to me. That's not everybody's
No,
problem, but
absolutely. Me too. Me too, for sure. For sure. But well, I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up our conversation. I mean, we barely made it through the first question that I
I
was going to
know.
ask you,
I wanted to ask
which
so many questions of you,
no.
man.
But I think I think there were some strands that kind of we followed or followed us through the
Hmm.
conversation. Certainly as far
Hmm.
as um, the nature of knowing itself. Like, is it just this knowing about versus this actual entering into participation with,
Yeah, yeah.
which requires some vulnerability, which requires some risk, some commitment. And I think that's very relevant to all of our lives and certainly to young people's lives. And I really appreciate you sharing a little bit about your own life journey and also
Hmm.
your journey as an educator too, because you're definitely trying to do more than just impart information for people to memorize, but there's a real desire to stimulate not just thought, but even transformation, it sounds like in the class and as we were kind of talking about in the beginning, to bring, we didn't even get to the grace part of it.
I
So
know. I
maybe there will
know.
be a follow-up conversation. That
Who
would be, that
knows?
would be
Yeah,
fun. So
that'd be
anyway,
great.
but thank you very much, Dr. Christopher, for joining us here on our little channel, and I wish you and your family all of God's blessings.
Thank you. Thank you. Really nice talking with you. We finally got the conversation we were hoping for. So.
Indeed.